Hi, my name is Deshara Thomas, and my project is titled The Lead Poisoning Crisis in Zamfara, Nigeria. The objectives for this assignment includes understanding the causes of the lead poisoning crisis, the events that led up to the crisis, the effects of lead exposure on people, and solution/ongoing support for Zamfara. So the table of contents, we'll start with the timeline of events, and then we'll follow that up with lead poisoning by location, which includes figure number 1, which is a lead poisoning contamination map. Then we'll move to lead exposure risk and treatment, which includes 4 figures, the first being an exposure risk table, the second being an exposure risk line graph, the third being a treatment bar graph, and the final being a treatment pie graph. And then we'll end with outcomes, solutions, and future work summary slide. So the timeline of the lead poisoning crisis. So it began with an excess number of children under 5 dying. So that is how researchers discovered the high levels of lead in remote villages within Zamfara state. And that was around March of 2010. And then we move on to May or June of that year, and we see that there is an outbreak confirmed in 2 villages, and that deaths are now being reported in at least 6 villages. So, continuing building onto that momentum, we go into like the fall time of 2010, and we see that there's an increase in the number of confirmed cases identified. And that is when the World Health Organization confirmed an outbreak linked to artisanal gold mining. In 2011, environmental decontamination and chelation therapy were implemented in affected villages. And in the following years, additional health and environmental responses were implemented, like public health messaging and controlled mining activities. And within the last few years and to present day, the situation has improved, but it is not completely eradicated. So the Sahel region includes Mali, Chad, and Sudan, among other areas. The Sahel has short, unpredictable, rainy seasons, and that is paired with an arid landscape. So um, climate change has resulted in more severe drought events. The Sahel is characterized by ecoclimatic conditions, political instability, poverty, urbanization, and conflict over resources. So the Sahel is referred to as ground zero in terms of climate change and the effects that it has. The gold ore processing activities table. This table was developed through interviews, a questionnaire instrument, and various collection and analysis techniques, which were mainly centered around blood lead levels, the surrounding environment, and exposure to lead. So 77% of the villages reported participation in any gold ore processing activities within the previous year. These villages were classified as ore processing villages, and subsequently, villages who did not participate in those activities were classified as non-ore processing villages. From this table, we can see that the most common activities were washing, which was at 70%, breaking rocks, which is at 69%, and drying, which is also at 69%. These villages identify more than 80 sources of ore geographically dispersed. Comparisons of characteristics line graph. So my line graph is a comparison of characteristics of ore processing villages and non-ore processing villages. Both types of villages who were surveyed reported having at least one child with higher than average blood lead levels, or having a child who experienced convulsions/death following convulsions. In ore processing villages, childhood convulsions and deaths, along with high soil and dust lead levels, were much more likely to be found in villages that recently reported gold ore processing. The data backs up the assertion that processing lead-rich gold ore results in lead-contaminated villages/homes, lead poisoning among young children, and possible convulsions and death. So the blood lead levels bar graph. This bar graph shows a significant decline between the discovery of elevated lead levels in about May to June 2010 in comparison to post-phase 3 results in about September to December 2013. These blood lead levels were collected for children younger than 5 years old by the beginning of the cleanup phase. Each phase included residential compounds and common areas which previously had high levels of contamination. The various phases included chelation, closure of contaminated landfills, and the development of local government and community activities. So the oral chelation treatment pie graph, this pie graph is focused on data collected about the number of children who have received oral chelation treatment for lead contamination during the remediation phases, which were mentioned in the previous slide. So this data was collected through 2010 until about 2013, and from the chart we can see that Ibarra here in the dark blue, in the like kind of medium blue, it had about 633 total treated, which is a large number of children, and it's also the highest number that have been treated within Zamfara. Zargama is next, and that is the brown area on the pie graph, and they have treated 390 total at that point in the remediation phase. And then third is Dareta, which is in the darker green, the forest green, and that village had 372 children treated in total. Um, so in total, like overall, 2,349 plus children have been treated after being tested for lead in their blood. I think it is very important to keep track of treatment processes for scalability of implementation. This treatment regimen could possibly be used in other countries who have high levels of lead. In summary, more than 400 children under the age of 5 died and hundreds more developed serious acute and long-term irreversible health effects. Lead exposure can also happen from paint, leaded gasoline, and batteries. Exposure to lead is extremely dangerous, especially for children, to the brain, kidneys, bones, and nervous system. Exposure to lead can lead to issues like developmental problems such as lower IQ scores and growth issues, and more serious problems like convulsions and death. Chelation therapy removes lead from the body and is effective for removing critical levels of lead from children. The removal and replacement of topsoil and thorough removal of dust from homes and compounds addresses the environmental contamination. More than 200 ministry, private personnel, and village employees were trained to conduct remediation activities. Although this problem is not 100% solved, numbers have lowered significantly. More funding and work are necessary for this issue to be completely eradicated. Thank you.